Welcome to this chapter. This chapter is about the biological effects of radiation, ionizing radiation, and the dose concepts. So far we talked about alpha, beta, and gamma radiation. And we also discussed how these type of radiations interact with matter. And we concluded in every case that there is ionization, and that is a very big problem. We will see that type of interaction, that means that ionization, is the ultimate reason of the biological consequences. If we have a look at the biological effects, the type of the effects, we can categorize these effects into two different types. We have deterministic effects of these radiations or stochastic effects. There is a major difference between the two. Why only the two? Actually, when we have deterministic effects, that occurs on a short-term heavy exposure. Normally, this is an accident. However, in the medical practice, it is used for therapy. So it's not accidental, it is intentional. We will see later how it works. So, deterministic effect can actually, this means destruction of tissues, cells. You can have symptoms like skin burn or blurred eyelids or a complete radiation sickness. Of course, a complete radiation sickness is not the purpose in medical applications. We want locally destroy some tissues, and that will be the ultimate goal. So this type of effect, biological effect of the ionizing radiation, is used for therapy purpose in nuclear medicine. The other, it is more interesting, is the stochastic effect. Whatever you do, even if you are just exposed to the natural background radiation, you have stochastic effect. It means that you will have a little increase in the risk to get cancer. So this occurs on long-term low-level exposure typically. And not necessarily a fatal damage of cells, DNA, and just because this is not a fatal damage, so a cell is not totally destroyed. If it is there is just a partial injury of the cell, there is a risk that the propagation of the cell will be uncontrolled, which means a tumor. So the risk of getting cancer in the future increases as a consequence of the stochastic effect. I have to tell you that it is not possible to avoid. So this is unavoidable in diagnosis, but the risk is overcompensated by the value of the diagnosis the doctor can have when gamma radiation, mostly gamma radiation, is used for diagnostic purpose. Whatever I say, as we could learn from the previous page, ionizing radiation is dangerous to health. You may have deterministic symptoms, or you may have some increase in the risk of getting cancer. Whatever you do, it is dangerous. However, since we use it for medical purpose or in any other area of life, we have to be able to control this danger. In order to control the danger, we need quantitative measurement of the biological consequences, and for this quantization, or making it quantitative, we use the dose concepts. The first dose concept is the so-called absorbed dose. This is a measure of the absorbed energy in any material, not only in live tissue, is important, given in units, joule per kilogram. It is called gray. Okay. It is used when radiation therapy is applied with incorporated beta or alpha emitters in order to produce deterministic effects on the unwanted tissue. You may be confused that I said that it is not about live tissue. I just said it is valid for everything, but not necessarily on live tissue. So this is absorbed energy. Okay, but how can we calculate now from an absorbed energy the biological consequence? It was realized very early that the biological consequences, and now I'm talking about the stochastic effects, are proportional to the absorbed dose, the absorbed energy. Okay, but you remember the problem is that the mechanism how energy is transferred to matter is ionization. And ionization is not a very nice thing for a live tissue. So that is the reason of the biological consequence. And if the ionization is the problem, then probably if you have different types of radiations, these different types of radiations may have different mechanisms for the ionization they cause in the live tissue. Therefore, the biological consequence will also be different. So you have to be able to describe this difference, and to describe this difference, they introduce the so-called radiation weighting factors, which is multiplied with the absorbed dose, and then you get the so-called equivalent dose. This is a measure of the added risk of stochastic effects, tumor formation in a given tissue, a product of the absorbed dose and the unitless radiation weighting factor. As I said, this radiation weighting factor takes into account the differences between the different radiations, alpha or beta or gamma radiation. It is very important to see that if you are exposed to radiation and you get an absorbed dose for, say, gamma radiation, and this is 8 gray, then you are dead. You are killed. 8 grays. And you see 8 grays means that 8 joule per kilogram. This is a very small amount of heat. It is equivalent to the extra heat you get if you drink a cup of hot tea. And the hot tea will not kill you. But the same amount of energy, if it is transferred to your body through ionization process, then you are killed. So that's the danger of ionizing radiation. Okay, how do these radiations differ in terms of this radiation weighting factor? This radiation weighting factor for beta radiation and also for gamma radiation is 1. And this is the starting point, okay? But for alpha radiation, it is 20. So that means that, say, if you are exposed to a gamma radiation or alpha radiation of the same transferred energy to the same absorbed dose, then maybe if it is gamma, then you cannot even recognize, but if it is alpha, you may be killed. So it is a very important issue. You have to take it into account. The absorbed dose and the equivalent dose have the same physical unit, joule per kilogram. However, the name of the units were different. For the equivalent dose it was sievert, while for the absorbed dose it was gray. The difference in the names would like to express the difference that the sievert dose is always a biological dose already. The same is true for the effective dose, which is the third very important dose concept to describe the biological effect of the radiation. This is a measure of the added risk of stochastic effects, tumor formation in the whole human body, a weighted sum of the equivalent doses of the different tissues or organs. The unitless tissue weighting factors, this is the one, express the sensitivity of the various tissues to tumor formation. It is given again in joule per kilogram, and it is again sievert. I have to add that whenever we consider these dose concepts, we know that we always have to calculate with them. It is impossible to avoid the stochastic effects of the dose, but it is never targeted. But whenever we perform a diagnostic investigation, in such a situation, we always have to have a reasonable or acceptable effective dose. Now the question arises, of course, that what is the reasonable, what is the acceptable? As I said, the stochastic effect means that you have a fatal risk. If you get cancer, you will die if you don't go to see a doctor, of course. So this is a fatal risk. Okay, but what is the level of fatal risk you may take? It has been, however, determined already. Why? Because there are several other activities in life which also have a fatal risk. Just think about driving a car. If you drive a car, you may have a fatal accident. Okay, you know that, and still you don't give up driving a car. We are driving cars, and we know that there is a danger. So by now we know exactly that what is the risk of having a certain amount of dose. If you compare it with the general risk of different activities in life, then you reach a conclusion that this annual dose limit is 20 millisievert, for example, for me. So if I get 20 millisievert dose per year, then the risk I take is more or less equivalent to the general risk the society accepts. So probably it is lower than driving, than being a taxi driver, for example. Okay, but maybe higher than just sitting in the room all the time and playing with a computer or something like that. So this 20 millisievert per year is roughly equivalent to the general fatal risk of an average activity in life. Okay, that's okay. So this is for professionals. For the general public, this recommended dose limit is 1 millisievert per year. Okay, but then the question arises that what is the situation when you go to see a doctor? And even you may suffer deterministic effects, then mostly and most probably the dose you get is much higher than 20 millisievert. In the doctor-patient relation, the dose the patient is exposed to is determined solely by the doctor. So in this situation, the patient does not belong to any category. So then he or she is not a general public. He is absolutely in the hands of the doctor. So the doctor takes full responsibility in judging that the value of the medical information or benefit is larger than the risk of the dose that is caused to the patient. Thank you for your attention.